Chris Candido was born on March 21st, 1972. He started training at the age of 14 under Larry Sharpe and wrestled for World Wrestling Association. Chris attended Red Bank Catholic High School. There, he would meet and began dating Tammy Lynn Sitch, and the two would remain together for the remainder of Chris's life, with Chris being the only faithful one in the relationship. Candido grew up with Jonathan Reckner, who would later take the name of Balls Mahoney in ECW. Their careers would run parallel to one another's, with both training at Larry Sharpe's Monster Factory, and both would go on to wrestle for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, the NWA, WWF, and ECW, as well as both having stints in the independent circuit. Candido's first big wrestling promotion was in 1992 when he began wrestling for Smoky Mountain Wrestling, where Sitch would join Chris as his valet. There, Candido would become the U.S. Junior Heavyweight Champion 3 times, Television Champion, and Tag Champs twice with Brian Lee. In 1994, Chris would win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, but eventually lost it to Dan the Beast Severn in 1995. Candido and Reckner, now named Boo Bradley, would form a short-lived tag team that ended after a loss to the team of Tracy Smothers and Cactus Jack. The loss resulted in the two having a loser leaves town match that would see Candido and Sitch packing their bags and head to New York, where they would debut for the WWF as the Bodydonnas, now known as Sonny and Skip. The two had fitness guru gimmicks and would later see Tom Pritchard join the group as Zip. In 1996, the team would win the tag titles at WrestleMania 12 against the Godwins. Unfortunately, that would be the peak for Candido and the company, and rumors began to circulate about Sitch's wandering eye, and the truth would come out only after Candido's death. Candido was blindly in love with Tammy and just didn't want to accept the truth.
First of all, when there's a girl in the business, you're surrounded by guys who are on the road for a long period of time, who are also full of testosterone, and we're, from the very fact that at some point in our lives, we say that we want to be professional wrestlers, we're obviously something fucking mentally wrong with us. Okay, so that's number one. You get all those guys and you put us together, and we have to travel around together in, in a cosmetic business and stuff. There's different people act different ways. And then you throw a few girls into the mix, but back then you threw just one girl into the mix. There was going to inevitably be something said, and you have nobody else. You're a guy on the road. You have your wife, your girlfriend's home. There may not be a rat in the town that day. You have to look at somebody, and she's the thing closest to you. So there's going to inevitably be rumors and stuff said and whatnot. But the thing with Sean is he was 24 hours a day the Heartbreak Kid. He wasn't just a guy who played a character. He was, he thought, or whether he really did think it, whether he was just doing it just to fuck with me, or just he legitimately tried to act like the Heartbreak Kid 24 hours a day. So at first it didn't bother me because it's common sense that shit's gonna be said. But we were together fucking 24 hours a day. When I'm in the ring, she's right fucking next to me. So if the only time anything does happen, and I have the tape of it, there was also a goat involved, and I'll sell it to you for a lot more money. But
so there is no tape of her and Sean, because there's rumors that there was a tape.
No.
Okay.
Well, if there was, wouldn't somebody fucking have it? Of all people, wouldn't you fucking have it?
Yeah, exactly.
And if you did, wouldn't it be in your newsletter gimmick and you'd be fucking selling it?
Basically.
So
the rumors of her and Sean are pretty much not true.
Well, I'll put it this way. I would, like to just believe that nothing happened. If something, I'm sure if something did happen, they're not going to fucking tape it, for God's sake. That would be just stupid to fucking do. But
did it ever get to the point where you actually had to question Tammy on and be like, yo, this is what I'm hearing?
No, you question people are married for 40 years, and and they go out to dinner with their secretary or something, the wife gets hot on them. It's just human nature. So, especially in being, being young and abrasive too. So of course we questioned it, and it caused arguments between us and stuff like that. But there's nothing she could have done about it. There's stuff is going to be said because she was the only girl, plus she was the top girl, and Sean's the top guy. So in the smart fans' eyes too, people would be yelling stuff to me because in their eyes it made no sense for the girl who was the top girl in the business. Well, why the fuck is she going out with Skip? You know what I mean? It didn't seem like a perfect match to anybody. You know what I mean? but you couldn't get around stuff being said. It was obvious that it was going to fucking have to happen.
What about the Davey Boy Smith rumors? There's all rumors about her and Davey Boy.
Yeah, and I didn't even hear that one until recently, and the poor guy's already been gone for quite a long time. We rode with Davey all the time, and we were always together. But Davey wasn't even a guy that would he never ratted around or anything like that either,
Right.
Because Diana would legitimately fucking be able to kick his ass. She stretched me, Dustin, and Stone Cold one night in the Cow Palace in San Francisco in 35 seconds. Stu was teaching me those moves. Yeah, can I show it to you? I'm like, yeah, Diana. It's here. She put me in it. So try and get out. I tried to get out, and she, boom, had me. And then Dustin's like, God, doomed it to him, and Steve's, you guys are fucking stupid. And he choked him out, too. So Davey didn't fuck around with anybody.
All right.
Smoky Mountain was only Chris?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, completely.
Okay. Okay, WWE, WWF, first run. Mm-hmm. We know Sean.
Sean. There's one that Damien doesn't know about. I just remembered.
Well, which he will now. Virgil.
What?
I don't know.
No.
Ahmed, Great
Ew.
Googly Moogly.
I don't go for chocolate.
Well, who was the other one in your first run up there then? It was Sean and...
One of my best friends. What are you doing?
You want to take a guess? You can throw it out.
He's gotta puke.
Draws.
No.
Story.
Never in a million years.
You heard a story?
Never in a million years. I swear on my father's grave.
I heard a story.
No, Father's grave. I take Father's
I've
grave.
heard
over
stories about it, all kinds of shit. No, that never happened.
His word on it.
Give me the year and we'll see if we can guess it.
That never happened. Never in a million years. Swear to God.
Oh, I'll have to tell you, suck it, because I'm gonna have to take his word for it.
Draws? Said it himself? Oh.
Even talk.
Never in a million years. No, there was no draws. Believe me, he was too fucking weird. Very nice guy, but no, not my type.
Worker or office? What are we talking about?
Worker. One of my best friends I ever had in the business.
Who's the best friend in the business?
Zip.
No.
Zip.
He had a British accent.
Regal?
No.
Davey.
Yeah.
Oh,
Would you do that to Diana?
Were you and Davey together for a prolonged time, or was this a drunken fling?
It was an off and on.
Did Sean know?
Yeah, because Davey was after Sean.
So you were the source
I was source for a lot of heat.
of all that shit. Look at you.
Well, I was a big source of the heat between Sean and Brett because Sean thought I was banging Brett, but I wasn't. Brett and I were just very good friends.
Right.
So that was a lot of base heat between them. Was me too.
Look at you.
I plan on doing a future video on Tammy Sitch because there's a whole lot to talk about there. In 1996, Chris Candido would join Extreme Championship Wrestling, where in my opinion he did his best work. Now going by No Gimmicks Needed, Chris Candido, he would join the Triple Threat stable alongside Shane Douglas and Lance Storm, who would later be replaced by fellow New Jersey native Bam Bam Bigelow. However, during that time, Candido and Storm would win the tag titles and hold them for 6 months before losing them to RVD and Sabu. After which, in 2000, Candido would join WCW and immediately win the vacant Cruiserweight title. The following night, Candido would be joined by Tammy Sitch in WCW after Sitch had been replaced by a new top diva going by the name of Sable. Later that year, Candido would lose his title to Daphne in a mixed tag match. Chris would briefly join the New Blood before realigning himself with Douglas and Bigelow to revive the Triple Threat. That too was short-lived, and Candido would leave WCW later that month. From there, Candido would make appearances for XPW, New Japan, and TNA. Unfortunately, Chris would break his ankle at Lockdown 2005 in a match where he teamed with Lance White versus Apollo and Sonny Sayaki. This led to Chris developing pneumonia, which caused his untimely death in 2005. I personally had an experience with Chris Candido in 1998 when ECW came to the Genesis Center in Gary, Indiana. I had asked Axel Rotten to take a photo with me, and after a few seconds, Rotten looked around and pointed at some random fan and said, "That guy'll take a photo with you." Well, Candido saw what he did, and he came over and he said, "Hey, I'll take a photo with you. And he did his Sabu pose, and it was just a very kind gesture of him, and he didn't have to do it, but that just shows the character that Chris had. I'm going to end this video with some words from people that knew Chris best. Rest in peace, Chris.
Chris was one of my, I say it all the time, Chris was one of my favorite people ever. Not just in wrestling, like just as a person. Like I was obviously close to him on the road, but off the road, like I considered him as a brother as well. Like we were just like so close. And when he passed, it killed me because I literally was getting on a plane to go to California when I got that phone call. And I was going to California for like 2 weeks and I wasn't able to come back, and I missed his burial. And that always like hung over my head that I wasn't able to go. And I said, I just hope that everybody realizes, like, because it was just like a sudden thing. I was working, you know what I mean? Like, I hope that,
of course.
You know, she just didn't want to be there. Like, it killed me to get on that airplane that morning.
I had a lot of time for Chris. Chris was kind of earning his wings in Smoky Mountain when I was there. Part of my run there, did some commentary. I always thought he looked like a Dick the Bruiser that was left in the dryer too long.
Yeah,
and that's not a negative.
right.
Great symmetry, he's thick, strong, but he was a magnificent student of the game. And he sat under Cornette's learning tree a lot. And hell, so did Tammy, Sonny, you know, because they were together at that time. And I can guarantee you she learned a lot about the wrestling business and Jim Cornette. If you work for him, you couldn't help but learn things. They may not be your philosophy, but you're going to learn some information that's viable, that you can use if you care to put your ego aside and use it. I think Chris's biggest downfall was his size. And, you know, he was what, 5'8", 5'9"?
Something like that, yep.
He looked great, physique, big barrel chest, all that stuff. And he could work with anybody. But he was going to be limited as to how far he could go, especially as a single in a major company working main events. Probably wasn't going to happen that often. He needed to be in a tag, I think. But it wasn't his work, Paul. It was not Chris Candido's work. His work was excellent. His size, the detriment, and I you know, I don't know how much to believe, not to believe about his issues with the clique. I don't know how deep those wounds were or whatever, but they were bullying him around, and I felt bad for him because they got real personal, and that's not cool. So that's why I would say his height is the biggest issue.
Chris was a tremendous talent and way beyond his age. And he not only could work athletically, but once he got in Knoxville and he started traveling with all those veterans and being around Tom Pritchard and Stan Lane and Jimmy Del Rey and Dirty White Boy and Tracy Smothers and Bob Armstrong and all those guys, then he started learning psychology and he picked that up so quick. And, you know, he could nail finishes and he could cut promos. He could do just everything. And they just, you know, they brought him up and they said, oh, here's this short little guy. He reminds me of that Tony Little. Let's make him a fitness guy, because they didn't take him seriously. And then Sonny pulled out of the pack because they weren't used to that many gorgeous, hot young girls at that point. And, you know, and that once that she got over, then they just left Chris to float. But he was the star of the family and the star of the show, as far as if you were running a wrestling promotion. But since it was a, you know, basically a sideshow circus character moment, it buried him, and he was miserable. And I mean, they knew he was miserable too. It's not like he hid it. And I used to tell him, hey, at least you're here. Maybe something will happen. But I couldn't come up with that much rosiness to paint it, you know, in a better light for him. He knew it sucked. It sucked. It was horrible. It was obvious.
I like Skip a lot. Here's another one gone too soon. We got along, his wrestling ability, his look, everything. It was like a night off wrestling, Skip. There was no pulling teeth or arguing or egos.
Dude, literally, me and Chris grew up 6 blocks from each other, you know, and when we finally first met, and it's ironic because from the day we first met, it was, you know, it was like two brothers meeting, like long lost family. We were, I was on Little League Baseball. It was actually Babe Ruth, and he had a Hot Rod shirt on, okay? And this is literally how I met Chris. I told this story before a lot, you know, but he has his shirt on. That's what he wore for a uniform. He didn't have his uniform shirt. He wore a Hot Rod shirt. He had his glove on the other hand. I mean, if you saw him in the ring, you know, Chris was an athlete, you know. But back then, pro wrestling, only pro wrestling, you know, he was playing sports to play sports, you know. So we started talking wrestling, and it was the first time I was going to go to Convention Hall to see live wrestling. You know, we had bought tickets, and he's like, oh, well, you're going to be at the show? I'm going to be at the show. In fact, why don't you get there early and you can start wrestling with me? I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And he's like, oh, no, my grandfather's one of the promoters. I'm like, my ass, you know, so we're, you know, I talked like that when I was 12. So he's like, no, seriously, get there at noon. So all right, no problem. We exchanged phone numbers. 2 days later, he's like, dude, you know, start walking down to the beach and come by, we'll meet at the Wagon Bridge. So we met at the Wagon Bridge, and he goes, look, this is how you take bumps. I swear to God, on the sand. Boom, so I took my first bump on the sand. He goes, now get there early, and we'll meet up and help set up the ring.
You were able to get in the ring?
Yeah, after Chuck beat us up for 20 minutes, you know. He's like, here's a forearm. Boom! You know?
How old are you now, like 12, 10?
I was 12.
Okay.
I was 12. And so I got there at noon, and Chris was there, his grandfather was there, Scott was there, which was one of the three amigos, because that was another friend of Chris's when he was growing up in a different town. And big kid, you know. So the ring shows up with the ring crew, but because us 3 kids are there, do the work.
Yeah.
And then we got, you know, 3 12-year-olds setting up a wrestling ring, lugging, and it was Larry's 22-foot. I mean, if you know the difference between this was an old boxing ring, 22 by 22. That's a huge ring. So we're having to lug the post by ourselves, and they're like, yeah, and then you do this, and then you do this. Well, how do we do this? Just do it. And Chris is like, no. So we put the ring up, and he's like, all right, let's get in. I'm like, well, okay. And, you know, so we start bumping into Chuck. You know, I met Chuck, and Chuck's like, so you want to do this, huh, kid? Bam! And he's like, here's a slam. Boom! I'm like, oh my God. And then being the first time, do 50 flat bumps. Okay, I took 50 bumps, you know, do 50 foot bumps, 50 foot bumps, you know. But because we lived next to each other, it became every day, every other day. Let's get together, let's go to the beach, let's find a place to do
Did you start to assume personas like that? Like to do like
oh yeah.
Who were you?
In fact, because they had we had decided, since we were doing that, and you know, Chris we had other friends, you know, kids like John Lou here. Oh Jesus, John Fudge, he was a Boy Scout. You know, these are kids from the neighborhood that we would gimmick up. We'd have our own little fake shows, and then we decided, hey, if we can get a ring, we can put on a real show. We don't have to charge anything. So we figured out that if we get like MS, like to say it's a sponsorship for MS, we could set the ring up. You know, wouldn't charge anything. We'd just pay for the ring out of our pocket and sell, you know, snacks and food and stuff on the side, and put the kids in the ring. And then if someone came down from the wrestling school, well, they can have a match. So we put on that little BS show of the kids, and we got like 30 people there. And who came down with the ring was Bam Bam Bigelow. And at the time he was wrestling was the Mad Russian Davey G. And this was Bammer's first match in front of people other than, you know, like the wrestling school, like this was his first match. So that will tell you right there, but it was such a hit. And, you know, I think it ended up costing my mom money and Chris's mom money and Scott's mom money to do it, but we did it, you know, and we were like, we got to do this next year. So we started making it a yearly thing. You said something about characters before. Chris was always like a pretty boy gimmick, you know. He was CC Ryder, Chris Candido. I was the Rebel Warrior, and I used the Confederate flag face paint like the Freebirds. Kind of like but that was like that look, and then it was, but that's the name I kept, you know, and I just switched it to different things. Eventually it was black circles under the eyes, doing the Kevin Sullivan bit when he was in Florida, because that influenced us a lot, because we were also lucky enough to get, you know, 16 hours a week of wrestling on cable. So we were constantly, we weren't together watching wrestling together. We're like sneaking phone calls to each other at 1 in the morning. Did you get it on? Yeah, okay. And I'm like, well, you go to bed. You see what he just did to Dusty? You know what I mean? So that's you know, it's how a lot of guys do it.
What was it like working with Chris Candido?
Chris Candido was always a blast wrestling him. Yeah, I mean, he was unpredictable and I don't know. He was just, you know, one of the nicest guys and the funniest guys. It was just never a dull moment being around Chris. And that's one of the greatest things, you know, great things I loved about ECW was Chris. And he was actually my first match in ECW.
I love Chris Candido. I've met a lot of people in professional wrestling who are passionate about what they do. Chris Candido was right at the top of loving everything he did when he stepped in the ring. He lived for wrestling. He every second of the day was dedicated to professional wrestling. He was a great guy. He was never, ever one of those guys who skimped in the ring or was lazy in the ring. He put his heart and soul into professional wrestling. Once he got to WWF at the time, it's WWE now, he was pretty much regulated to, easy for me to say, to being that Bodydonna guy, and he wasn't quite sure how he fit in. But of all the people in professional wrestling, I think Chris has to rate right up there at the first 1 or 2 who lived and loved this business more than anybody I've ever met.